In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at some NHL offseason rumors concerning teams like the Montreal Canadiens, Boston Bruins, Arizona Coyotes, and Nashville Predators. Plus, we also have some more information on the NHL and the NHLPA's committee that they're working towards coming back to return to action. We'll jump into the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of things I want to discuss today. Let's kick things off with the NHL and the NHLPA's committee that we've learned of here, that are working together to try to find a way to return and finish the 1920 NHL season and hold Stanley Cup playoffs so they can award the Stanley Cup. Now, of course, we've talked about the last number of days, numerous times, about some potential plans that we might see, but now we've just learned a little bit more about behind the scenes, how things are going. As I've mentioned in numerous videos when we've discussed the topic about the potential return, obviously the league and its players have to come to an agreement on how it could all work out, and of course the NHL itself as a whole needs other places to play ball as well, including health officials in various jurisdictions who kind of hold a little bit of control over what gatherings can take place and not. Certainly a lot of hurdles left to overcome for this to actually happen. Now, of course, in my last video I mentioned a potential May 15th return. There was some confusion on that in the comment section. I didn't mean return to play on May 15th. Obviously, if you listen to the full explanation, it was that May 15th might be a date that the NHL calls back their players to head back to their NHL cities where they normally would reside during the course of the NHL season. Of course, once they return, most players are going to be traveling between Canada and the US, some from Europe or other places, and obviously they'd have to quarantine for 14 days and get that out of the way before they could go into the next phase, which would be small gatherings as a team in an NHL facility, and obviously that would then take place after the 2 weeks. They'd have to do that for a little while and then move on to the next stage, which would be gathering the teams in NHL cities where they're going to be hosting the games. Obviously, they want to have time, 2 to 3 weeks for training camps. That could be done in a combination of their NHL cities or possibly in the host city locations. I'm not sure how the logistics of that would fly. And then from there begin action, holding 3 to 4 games per day, per city, to kind of get things sped along, to get the season finished, and then move on to probably an altered, possibly expanded playoff round for the Stanley Cup. So obviously what we learned about now is the NHL players that are involved with this committee. Obviously NHL executives like Gary Bettman, Bill Daly, Colin Campbell, and others are on the NHL side. But NHL players that are involved include Maple Leafs captain John Tavares, Oilers captain Connor McDavid, Winnipeg Jets forward Mark Scheifele, Flyers forward James Van Riemsdyk, as well as Senators defenseman Ron Hainsey. Of course, all those players likely appointed through the PA side of the business by their peers are the ones talking on behalf of the players in these meetings. They've had a couple of meetings so far with more scheduled to come. They're talking on a pretty regular, almost daily basis, trying to iron things out on how a return can go. But as Gary Bettman's pointed out recently in an interview with Ron McLean of Sportsnet, basically said that as much as they want to try to get some plans in place here, they do have to rely on other areas of government and health officials to kind of approve whatever they want to do to make it a possibility to return. But I guess we'll see. At least we know now what the PA side is being represented by for the players, and hopefully they'll get something figured out. And instead, they could start calling back players to be in their NHL cities as early as May 15th, with a potential return date likely not being around until July. So I guess we'll see how that plays out, and we'll update further once we have more information. Now, the other thing I want to discuss quickly as well is former NHL top star Eric Lindros is making a return to the league in a different capacity. He has agreed to start working again for the Philadelphia Flyers, where he played a big chunk of his NHL career. Lindros will be working with the Flyers as an ambassador type of role. We've seen many other former NHL players, alumni around the league support many of their teams that they've worked with. Usually one that's either the one that they worked with the longest, for example, in Lindros' case, he was a Flyer a long time. So it's nice to see him be more involved with the game at the pro level. Obviously, he had his career cut really short due to concussions, but it's nice to see Lindros return to action and be more involved. Now, jumping over to some of the teams we want to take a look at here, some offseason stuff, rumors involving free agency or trade. Let's take a look here first off with the Montreal Canadiens. Now, one quick tidbit of information, they are expected to be signing top prospect defenseman Alexander Romanov, but don't be surprised if he is delayed a little bit here in signing. Now, we reported as much as a few weeks back that he likely would be signing as soon as possible, which meant by the end of April. But with NHL season being on pause and a lot of uncertainty, and without a clear-cut direction on how this is going to go for the 1920 season, that could end up taking a little bit longer. There is some feeling out there that Romanov won't want to sign until that fate is decided on if they're going to resume play or not, how it's going to work, is the season canceled or whatever the case may be, because he's going to want to play, it sounds like, as early as this year if they can get back to playing. So could it be that Montreal could have him in their lineup should the NHL be able to start back playing again? It is a distinct possibility, and I think the Habs would be willing to get him signed and burn a year of the contract right away by letting him play the remainder of the season. So I guess we'll see, but don't be surprised if that signing is delayed a little bit because of the NHL season being on pause until that is sorted out. Now, staying with the Montreal Canadiens, there's a lot of other speculation, as we've discussed a few times before, but what they might be doing this offseason, referencing now an article from TVA Sports, outlining some things that they might be taking a look at, or at least they feel they should be looking at this season on the offseason once that finally comes to be, and that would be left shot defense and backup goaltending. Now, in this article, they reference the fact that Torrey Krug of the Boston Bruins should be one of Marc Bergevin's biggest targets to try to sign through free agency to shore up that left side of the defense. They feel that he would be very beneficial for the Habs overall. Great puck-moving defenseman, brings a lot of offense from the back end, and again, he could be very beneficial in playing with a guy like Shea Weber and helping extend Weber's career. He's been very good for obviously Chara in Boston as well. It takes the pressure off when they can have a big-time player like him kind of take some of the minutes and obviously be a big part of that back end. And clearly, Torrey Krug likely going to be looking for a contract around $7, maybe $7.5 million. Obviously, that's going to be impacted by whatever the cap finalizes to be. A lot of these free agents are really not, unfortunately for them, not a good time to be a free agent, where we likely have a flat cap, maybe decrease. Hard to say how that's going to all work out. But clearly Montreal would have to overpay to get him to leave Boston. Not quite clear if he's going to be able to even stay in Boston at all. I think the Bruins do want to try to keep him, but they've yet to have discussions around a potential extension, which isn't a huge surprise given everything that's going on. But Torrey Krug is going to be looking for a longer-term deal with some decent money. I know he's probably willing to take a little less to stay in Boston, but it could be a big-time overpayment for the Habs to lure him there. Big difference in the tax dollars as well and how they're taxed between the two cities. And obviously playing in Montreal is a whole different beast going to a division rival. So I guess we will see. Do I think he would be a great fit there? I do. I think Torrey Krug would be exactly the type of player that would be a huge add for Bergevin in Montreal, but it's not going to be an easy task, and not sure they're going to want to commit that much extra money by overspending to bring in a player like that when they could look to address other areas of the team. Clearly, Bergevin's been hoarding cap space for the last few years and has had a little bit of a hard time attracting free agents. I know going back even a couple of years to the John Tavares sweepstakes, they appeared to be wanting to get in on that and be all in ready to spend the money on Tavares, and they couldn't even get a meeting with him. So I know attracting free agents there has been tough, and I do think Bergevin likely does explore some free agent stuff this offseason when that finally comes, but not sure that they'd want to spend that much on Krug. But I do agree with the article. So in your opinion, assuming Torrey Krug doesn't re-up with the Bruins before we have an official offseason, should he be one of Marc Bergevin's top targets, and do you think it'd be worth spending $7+ million to bring him in from Boston if they were able to? Now, also here, they want to address the backup goaltending situation. This article goes on to reference the fact that they feel Montreal basically should bring in a veteran guy. And one of the players that they point out as being an almost perfect scenario for them would be Anton Khudobin, currently with the Dallas Stars, who's a pending UFA. Certainly been around the league a while, has been a pretty solid backup guy. Played well in Boston before. Of course, now he's been in Dallas for the last few years, played very well there. And I feel he'd be the perfect backup for Price, who he's strong enough that he can take off enough of the workload that Price doesn't have to worry about playing as much, which is good to keep him healthy and fresh. And at the same time, he's not going to really put too much pressure on him to steal a starting job because of where the stage he's at with his career. And they could allow guys like Caden Primo and the newly signed Demchenko, who they got from Russia, in the KHL. They could very well play things out in the American League. And of course, you get Charlie Lindgren too. I'm not really sure where he fits into things. I know he is technically signed, but I don't really see him being a huge part of the Habs' future. But I guess we will see how that goes. But clearly, I do agree with the article to an extent that a veteran backup would be a wise move for Bergevin, but obviously going to depend on the price tag. You're not going to want to take away too much from the minor league affiliate as well. Clearly, I think it'd be great for Primo and maybe Demchenko to possibly be the tandem in the American Hockey League this year. They could decide to go with Lindgren at the NHL level, but based on his play the last 2 years, I just don't have the confidence that that's really the best move. So I guess we'll see. Maybe he gets moved. It's hard to say where he fits in the situation, but with three capable American Hockey League goalies, I'm not really sure that one of them are going to really deserve to go down to the East Coast League either. So hard to say what they do with their goaltending situation. Clearly, there's some question marks there. But I do think bringing in a veteran guy to play with Price at the NHL level probably would be a wise move to give their younger guys some more time to develop and take the pressure off. Now, as I mentioned as well, I want to take a look at the team like the Nashville Predators. The Predators are another team who have some pending UFAs that are certainly questionable return, and that includes a few forwards like Granlund and Smith, for example. Both of them were kind of started slow this year, but after the coaching change, they did both seem to play better down the stretch, put up some better production, and clearly to sign both of these guys is going to be almost impossible without shedding some salary. And of course, as we mentioned before, maybe the NHL teams will be given a compliance buyout if there's going to be a flat or reduced salary cap, and that could play a big role in some of these teams shedding some very contracts that they're not real fond of right now. And for Nashville, that most likely would be Kyle Turris, given the fact that he's certainly played up and down at times, but really overall has not worked out for him with that particular team since his arrival there, and having big time contracts like Duchesne and Johansson already ahead of him and Nick Bonino. Not really sure it really makes sense for him to be there any longer, but they've tried moving him and has not worked out. They could also look at the possible buyout, but that's going to be expensive over a longer period of time, given the fact he still has a fair bit of term on his contract. So maybe if they're unable to move Turris, they might have no choice but to let one of these guys walk in free agency. But let me know your thoughts down below in the comments on the Predators. Do you think Granlund and Smith both return? Do they let one of them walk? Or do you think they will be successful in trying to finally rid themselves of the Turris contract? Lastly, here I want to touch on the Arizona Coyotes. Now, in the past, we've seen the Coyotes be a team lower in the standings, a team that's been lower in salary cap spending, and always had lots of space that they could do things with. And obviously, with a team where many contracts kind of went to die, so to speak. They bought many bad contracts from around the NHL where players basically were just there as a placeholder so they could pay those guys to not play for them and be cap compliant by spending enough to get to the cap floor. Now they're at a team who's maxed out at the salary cap. They have a guy like Taylor Hall who they seem like they really want to keep in town, and they're not going to have any space if the cap does not rise to do so. They would have no choice but to shed some contracts and be the opposite of what they used to be. So could Arizona actually be a team who's going to be shedding the not so favorable contracts now and taking the opposite approach and having other teams take advantage of the fact that they need to do that like they used to do in the past? I would think the most likely candidates for that, if that were to happen, would be maybe like a Phil Kessel or a Derek Stepan. Clearly, Kessel's numbers dropped significantly playing with the Coyotes this year. Not really sure that it was the best move, but of course, looking back in retrospect, but at the same time, he's got a great history with lots of offensive production, and I'm not sure what it is, but even Hall himself, who they would want to be moving players around to keep, didn't do the greatest either. So even with players like that there, they just can't seem to get the goals. Very offensively challenged team. They need to find some goals. Buying out a guy like Kessel might not make sense from that perspective, but they might need the space to go another direction, maybe keeping a guy like Hall and finding some other players who can play around him, if they can do that. But of course, like I said before, I'm not confident Taylor Hall is going to want to stay in Arizona. But as it stands right now, they're only going to have about $2 million in cap space for next year with players to re-sign, and that's assuming the cap stays flat. So there's just no way they can bring Hall back unless they were to move some money out. Like I said, when you look around their roster, the only contracts to me that would make any sense would possibly be Derek Stepan, who's been there for 3 years now. Every year's been a bit of a decline from the year before. And of course, Kessel, who was in his first year but still has a couple years left on his deal, who is not coming off a great first year in Arizona. So I know he's got a great relationship with Rick Tocchet. Probably not something they would really prefer to do, but they got to do something in Arizona to get some goals on the board. And obviously, having a shot at keeping Taylor Hall might be a big help to do that, but hard to say which direction they go. Teams like Ottawa and New Jersey, the biggest ones that come to mind, who could basically weaponize their cap space. They've got all kinds of space who can take advantage of teams like Arizona, who are going to be very cap strapped and be able to take on contracts for them. And of course, they're going to be wanting some sweeteners in order to make that happen, whether it be draft picks or prospects or something else, a nice young player to help with the rebuild. Will help them, obviously hurt Arizona in the long run, but at the same time, you do what you got to do to be cap compliant. So those are the teams in position to take advantage, and the Coyotes are in our team. We're going to have no choice but to shed moving forward here, or they're going to be starving for goals, I think, even more. So let me know your thoughts on everything we discussed today down in the comment section, and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing, turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and I will catch you next time.